MG Rob back with you, and today we're going to see if we can get something done on Project Ginsu. I have been getting a little bit of work done to it off camera, because once I jumped in and started working on it, I just did it and didn't film it. But I got all this stuff welded together on that side and on this side here. So these rails are now in on both sides, and they're attached on both sides through the those members that I did across here. I showed you doing the other side. So the basic framework there is now with the front and rear attached to each other. But what I'm going to start working on now is try to button up some of the firewall. Some of the stuff like this that's not quite done yet, back sides, and then put some of these cowl pieces in to solidify the whole cowl and firewall area. So like many other YouTubers out there, I like to develop my patterns for filling in pieces like this with CAD, or cardboard aided design. So I trimmed up a piece of cardboard, and this is from packaging material like cereal boxes and stuff like that. And I got to just transfer that over to a piece of metal. So once I got the pattern made, I just transfer it to a piece of metal. And for most of the metal on the body stuff, I'm using 18 gauge or 20 gauge, depending on what part of the body we're talking about and what the original thickness was. So I like to take this and just find a place, where I can put it on here and not waste too much metal, and just draw around it with a marker. And all I could do is cut it right on that inside edge of the line, and you should have an exact match to the pattern. Now, depending on the size, shape, and thickness, sometimes I'll use cut-off wheel, and sometimes I just use a pair of aviation snips. But one thing you got to know is when you're using aviation snips, that it will kind of bend the metal a little bit. And what I like to do is cut it a little bit too big at first. So it's somewhat close to the line. Because then when you go to cut it to your final size, you actually won't bend it up as much, because you're not trying to push as much scrap material with your cut. You can do it that way, or you can do it up, depending on whether it's on the right hand side or left hand side. You can still use the same snips to do it, but just flipping them over to allow it to, the part that's going to be the waste that's going to be bending away, to bend away without bending the material. Now, as long as the pair of aviation snips you have is nice and sharp and good and tight, you can actually cut some very small slivers off the edge of a piece of metal and really, you know, to fine tune your piece. Like if it doesn't quite fit, if you just need to shave just a little off. But if you got a cheap pair, they're a little bit loose, or they're not very sharp, you won't be able to do that. I have a tendency to find that what fits really good in cardboard doesn't always fit really good in the metal, because the cardboard will easily kind of twist and conform and make it look like it's a much closer fit than it really is. It's like in this case, it doesn't look nearly as good now because this isn't just flexing into place. But I'll just have to do a little bit of trimming, and I'll have to put a little bit of a bend right in here to twist it a little bit, and we'll be all right. And a good selection of grips is very handy for doing this type of stuff because you never know what you're going to need to get in there. So what I'll do is I'll just put a 2 tacks on this thing, then I'll come back and plug weld these and then weld it across here. Where it gets really thin right there, or really narrow, you can't get a lot of heat in there at once. So if you just shoot straight across, you're really likely to burn through. And right now I'm having trouble controlling the heat on my welder, so I've really got to be careful. See what I mean? Actually, that's from where it's a little bit thin from grinding on it before. Like I said, my welder right now is burning a little too hot, even though I got it on its lowest setting. I have to get that thing fixed someday. Now I gotta go back and fill holes. That's not fun. So sometimes that happens. Especially when your welder's not working right. Now this would need to be welded from underneath because there's a seam there. There's a second layer. Alright, well, I'm not really happy with how it looks. It is also in a part of the car that cannot be seen once it's together. So as long as it's solid, I'm going to go with it on this one. And I'll have to fire the air compressor up to get the tools to finish this. And I don't want the air compressor on while I'm filming because it makes too much racket. So I'm going to go ahead and move to the other side and do the other side. Alright, well, I got the other part of the firewall put in, but I wanted to get started on this post here, but I need to take this piece of metal out here. I don't know how well you guys can see it, but there's a bunch of spot welds down here. Now, they're very easy to see in person here. Now, there's a bunch of different ways of doing this, and everybody's got their own favorites. You got special spot weld drills and all that stuff. I'm going to show you another way of doing it. Now it takes a little bit of finesse and feel to not go too far with it, but you can just start out with, like, say, a 1/4 inch 3/16 drill bit, and you can start in on these. Don't go very deep at all, just a little bit like that. Then you can switch to a bigger drill bit, something about 5/16 to 3/8 range, and then come back. Yeah, I went too far there. But you can walk it a little bit like that, and it will help to take out the spot weld without drilling into the other piece behind it. And then you can take like I got this nice little chisel. It was a Craftsman chisel that I found at a yard sale. This is great for splitting these panels. You just go down and peel it off. Of course, the other way you can do this too is you can go in here with like a right angle cutoff wheel, or even a big grinder, like 4.5 inch grinder with either grinding wheel or cutoff wheel, and focus right on. And it takes a little bit of practice to figure it out, but you can watch it and you can see that just as you're almost through that layer of material, the area of the spot weld will actually change color, and the area around it, you'll actually start seeing a difference in color. That's because you got this metal thin enough. And then you can come back here and use a chisel to split it, just like I did here. Now, if you get the right depth while you're doing that, they'll come apart fairly easily with not a whole lot of cleanup to do on these. But you have to come back and grind these a little bit. But you're not drilling through this. You are taking a little bit of metal out of it because the tip of the drill bit's taking some of it out. So back here behind my shop, I had a row of parts cars sitting here. And now since I've got to move, I had to get them all out of there. But we had a lot of trouble here trying to pull them out with a skid steer because it's too soft back here. So we ended up just tearing the whole fence out down here because it was a lot more solid over there. And since they're tearing everything out of here for an industrial project, it doesn't really matter. So this magnet back here used to be mine at one time. I actually had 3 of them at one point. But a buddy of mine bought that off me many years ago, and it's been stored back there for quite a while now. Eventually that's going to become a project. And this MGA is just a nasty parts car that belongs to a customer of mine who bought it just so he could see how everything goes together to reassemble his cars with. And in these are just all my parts cars. So I got an MGA over there that was a father-son project that wasn't done very well, but was bought cheap. Got this GT that I took in as payment for some work I did after the guy told me he had no money when I got the work done. That was originally going to be my V8 project until I really looked hard at it and decided that wasn't the car to use. That's an early chrome bumper B that I picked up really cheap, and a very early midget. I mean, very early, like 300 and something car off the line, that I picked up really cheap as a part of a package deal, but was never able to get the title sorted out so that I could do something with it. So unfortunately, it's just been sitting here rotting away.